I moved into that old apartment building last summer because it was cheap, and honestly, I just needed somewhere to crash after my breakup. From the first night, though, I felt like I wasn't alone, like someone was watching me through the walls. The building was ancient, probably from the 1920s, with those thick plaster walls that swallowed sound. I was on the third floor, apartment 3B, a cramped studio with one big, grimy window overlooking a dingy alley. The rent was a steal for the city, and the landlord, Mr. Harlan, this grumpy old guy with a smoker's rasp, didn't care about references. He just tossed me the keys, muttered about keeping noise down, and shuffled off. I was grateful, even if the place smelled like mildew and the radiator clanked like it was possessed. It started small, the kind of stuff you brush off. I'd come home from my barista job, feet aching from 8 hours of rude customers, and notice things out of place. My keys, which I always hung on a hook by the door, would be on the kitchen counter. My coffee mug would be in the sink when I swore I'd left it on the table. I'm not the most organized person. My ex used to nag me about it, so I figured I was just scattered. New place, new stress, right? But it kept happening, and it started to nag at me like an itch I couldn't reach. About a week in, the noises started. Soft scratches, like nails dragging on wood, coming from the wall behind my bed. It happened at night when I was trying to sleep. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. Irregular, maddening. I thought rats, because old buildings like this are crawling with them. I bought traps and poison from the hardware store down the block, set them along the baseboards, and waited. Days passed. Nothing. No dead mice, no nibbled bait. But the scratching didn't stop. It felt deliberate, like something was testing the wall, feeling for a way through. I'd press my ear to the plaster, holding my breath, heart thumping. The second I did, it'd go silent. Like whatever it was knew I was listening. I tried laughing it off, telling myself it was pipes or the building settling. But it wasn't just at night anymore. I'd be eating cereal, scrolling my phone, and hear it faint, but there behind the wall. It was always that one spot, right where my headboard sat. Then the food started disappearing. I'd buy groceries, nothing fancy, bread, milk, some chips, and I'd swear I had more than what was left the next day. One morning, I opened a new loaf of bread, and half was gone, with crumbs scattered on the counter like someone had torn into it. I lived alone. No roommates, no pets. My ex took the cat in the breakup, and I hadn't had anyone over. My stomach knotted up. I started locking the door even when I was home, double checking the windows. That big alley window worried me most, grimy, with a rusty fire escape outside. I'd stare at it, imagining someone climbing up, silent watching. The unease grew roots. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. heart racing, convinced I'd heard footsteps in the kitchen. I'd grab my phone, use the flashlight, and creep out there. Nothing. The room would be empty, but the air felt wrong, heavy, like someone had just slipped out. I started sleeping with a lamp on, which made me feel pathetic, like a kid scared of monsters. I didn't tell my friends. They'd ask how the new place was, and I'd fake a smile, say, "It's fine, just creaky." I didn't mention the dreams. Nightmares where I'd see a shadow moving behind the wall, hunched, waiting, its breath sensing with the scratches. One night, after a brutal shift, spilled coffee on a customer, got screamed at, I came home and found my journal open on the table. I kept it in a drawer, hidden full of raw stuff about my breakup, my loneliness, things I'd never say out loud. It was open to a page from weeks ago, with a smudge like a fingerprint that wasn't mine. My hands shook as I closed it, stuffed it back in the drawer. That night, the scratching was louder, closer, like it was right behind my headboard. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a hammer from under the sink, bought it to hang pictures, and started tapping the wall, looking for hollow spots. The plaster felt soft in one area, like it'd been patched badly. I swung the hammer, just a light hit, and a chunk crumbled away. Dust choked the air. I coughed, shone my phone's light in. There was a gap, maybe a foot wide, leading into a crawl space between the walls. Old insulation, tangled wires, and dirt. But then I saw it, a crumpled wrapper from one of my missing candy bars, lying in the filth. My stomach dropped. I widened the hole, ignoring the mess, my arms burning from the effort. The space went deeper than I expected, maybe 3 feet, and it connected to the adjacent wall toward the hallway. I crawled in a bit, flashlight between my teeth, heart hammering. The air smelled wrong, faint but human. Sweat, unwashed clothes. There were more scraps. Another wrapper, a half-empty water bottle, a dirty blanket balled up in the corner. My breath caught. This wasn't rats. Someone was living in my walls. I backed out, hyperventilating, and called the police. 2 officers showed up, looking skeptical until they saw the hole, the evidence. They got serious fast, searched the crawl space with flashlights and guns drawn. I stood there, shaking, as they called out, "Police! Come out!" Silence at first. Then they found him. A man, skinny, wild-eyed, maybe in his 40s. He'd been squatting in the walls, entering through a loose vent in the basement and crawling up through forgotten spaces from old renovations. He had tools, small ones, for prying baseboards quietly. He'd watch me sleep, steal food when I was out or asleep. The cops said he'd done this before, in other buildings. A drifter, mentally unwell, but calculated. He knew how to stay hidden, moving through the building's veins like a ghost. I moved out the next day, crashed with a friend until I found a new place. But even now, I check walls, tap them for hollow sounds. I can't sleep without noise, TV, fan, anything to drown out silence. Because what if there's another space, another unseen tenant? I dream about his eyes, glinting in the dark, watching me. It makes me wonder how many people are out there, hidden in the places we call home. The police questioned him for hours. He said something that still chills me. He knew my name, not from mail or anything. He'd listened to my phone calls through the wall, heard me cry after the breakup. He called me his roommate, like we'd been sharing the space all along. The cops found a notebook in his blanket, scribbled with details about my routine, when I left for work, when I showered. He'd been timing his movements around mine. I burned my journal after that. Couldn't stand the idea of my thoughts being exposed again. But the memories don't burn. Every creak in my new apartment makes me freeze. Is it the building, or something else? Months later, Mr. Harlan called. He was renovating, found more crawl spaces in other units. Empty, but with signs, wrappers, blankets, scratches. How many tenants had no idea? How many still don't? He sounded shaken, like he hadn't known his building was a maze for people like that man. I avoid old buildings now. Too many secrets in their bones. But the fear follows me. Locks don't stop what's already inside. I keep a hammer by my bed, just in case. Not for pictures anymore. Sometimes I think about him still out there, maybe finding new walls to hide in. New roommates to watch. It's not just my story, it's a warning. Check your walls. Listen to the scratches. Because you might not be as alone as you think. I lived on the ground floor of that apartment, right above the basement, and the creaky floorboards always felt like they were whispering secrets. But the real terror began when I started hearing actual voices, faint, murmuring, like desperate conversations seeping up from under my feet. I'd been there about 6 months, a 1-bedroom in a quiet suburb, trying to piece my life back together after losing my job. The place was affordable, with high ceilings and big windows that let in plenty of daylight. At night, though, it turned eerie, isolated. The building had only 4 units, and my neighbors were elderly, their TVs barely audible through the walls. I was 29, starting over, sending out resumes, and the apartment was supposed to be my fresh start. But something about it never felt right, like the air held onto old sorrows. It started subtly, easy to dismiss. I'd be cooking dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta or scrambled eggs, and catch a whisper. Low, indistinct, like someone talking just out of earshot. I'd pause, spatula in hand, straining to hear. It sounded like it came from the floor, maybe the vents. I thought it was the upstairs neighbor's radio or wind rattling the old pipes. The building was at least 50 years old, with quirks like that, but it happened too often, always when I was alone, always from below. I mentioned it to Mrs. Ellis, the sweet old lady next door, while grabbing my mail. She chuckled, her eyes crinkling. This place is chatty, dear. Old buildings talk. Her words stuck with me, but they didn't ease the growing knot in my stomach. The whispers kept coming, clearer over time. Not full sentences, but fragments. Help. Down here. I'd freeze, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. Stress, maybe from job rejections, piling up. I started recording on my phone, holding it to the floor, playing it back loud. Nothing but static. Yet in the moment, the voices were real, undeniable, like a plea I couldn't quite grasp. One stormy night, the power flickered, rain hammering the windows. I was in bed, reading by my phone's flashlight, when the whispers turned to cries. Muffled sobs like a child or a woman in pain, coming from right under my bedroom floor. My skin prickled. I bolted upright, listening. It wasn't the storm. It was human, raw, desperate. I grabbed a crowbar from the closet. I'd kept it after a break and scare at my old place, and knelt by the floorboards. They were old, loosened spots. I pried one up, dust puffing into my face, and shone the light down. There was a gap, maybe a foot deep down to the basement ceiling. Cobwebs clung to insulation, and a faint musty smell hit me. No voices, though. The cries had stopped the second I lifted the board. I felt foolish, my hands trembling as I replaced it. Just the storm, I told myself. But I didn't sleep that night, my ears straining for any sound. The silence was worse, like it was holding its breath. The next morning, I called the landlord, Mr. Kessler. He managed multiple properties, always rushed. Basement's just storage. He said over the phone, voice clipped, locked tight. No one's down there. But he sounded off, like he was hiding something. I pushed, asked to check it myself. He sighed, said he'd send keys but it'd take a few days. His hesitation made my skin crawl. While waiting, the whispers evolved. They started naming me. Sarah, please. My name, clear as day from under the floor. My blood ran cold. I'd never said my name aloud in the apartment, not to neighbors, not on calls. How could anything know it? I stopped sleeping in the bedroom, dragged a blanket to the couch. I'd check under furniture, behind curtains, even the vents, looking for anything, cameras, microphones, some sick prank, nothing. But the voices persisted, louder at night, always when I was alone. I'd lie there, eyes wide, hearing, "Let me out," in a tone that broke my heart and terrified me. I stopped inviting friends over. How could I explain it? That my apartment was haunted by voices no one else heard. I was unraveling, jumping at every creak. My job search stalled, I couldn't focus. One night, I heard scratching, like nails on wood, alongside the whispers. I grabbed the crowbar again, tore up another floorboard. The gap below was the same, dusty, empty. But I saw something new, a faint mark, like a handprint in the dirt, too small to be mine. The keys arrived 3 days later, in a plain envelope slid under my door. My hands shook as I grabbed them and headed to the basement door in the hallway. The lock was rusted, the door heavy. It creaked open, revealing steep stairs descending into darkness. I flipped the switch. A dim bulb flickered, casting shadows over stacks of boxes, old furniture, and dust so thick it coated my throat. No people, no voices. But at the far end, under my apartment, was a walled-off section, bricked up, with a small metal grate at the bottom, like for ventilation. The whispers came from there. Clearer now, a woman's voice, weak but urgent. "Help me, please." I dropped to my knees, peered through the grate. Darkness at first, then God eyes, pale wide, staring back. A face, gaunt, pressed against the bars, lips moving faintly. I screamed, scrambled backward, nearly falling. My phone was in my hand before I knew it, calling 911. The police arrived fast, 2 officers, their faces skeptical until they saw my panic, the grate. They called for backup, brought tools. When they broke through the bricks, dust and mortar flying, I saw her, a woman, emaciated, chained to the wall of a hidden room, no bigger than a closet. She was barely alive, her clothes tattered, her skin gray. She'd been there for years, the cops later said, kidnapped by the previous owner, Kessler's father, who'd died suddenly, leaving her trapped. She'd survived on rainwater seeping through cracks, on rats she caught with her hands. The whispers were her pleas, echoing through the vents, reaching me. She'd heard me move in, learned my name from my phone calls, me talking to my mom, my friends unaware I was being listened to. She'd been trying to reach me for months. I couldn't stay after that. I packed a bag, moved in with my parents. The police investigation uncovered horrors. The old owner had kept her as a prisoner, his secret. The building had a history, other disappearances, never solved. The trial was gruesome, details I can't repeat. She survived, but barely. Her eyes, though they haunt me. In dreams I see them, pleading through the grate. I'm in a new place, now a high-rise with no basement, but any creak from below sends me spiraling. I check under floors, behind walls, always. I can't unhear her voice, her desperation. I volunteer at shelters now, listen to people's stories, hoping to make up for the months I ignored her. The guilt claws at me. I lived above her, cooked, slept while she suffered. If you hear whispers, don't dismiss them. Check. Listen. They might be real, begging for someone to notice. I didn't, not soon enough, and I'll carry that forever. I inherited that apartment from my aunt after she passed, and at first, I thought it was a godsend, a free place in the city, no more scraping for rent. But when I found the hidden door behind the bookshelf, everything changed, and I started to understand why she never talked about this place. Aunt Clara had lived there alone for decades, a recluse ever since my uncle died in his 30s. It was a spacious two-bedroom on the top floor of a converted Victorian house, all high ceilings and warped wooden floors. I was 27, just laid off from my graphic design job, and moving and felt like a lifeline. The place came furnished with her stuff, dusty bookshelves crammed with old novels, a creaky bed, faded curtains that smelled faintly of lavender. I started unpacking, trying to make it mine, but from the first night, the air felt heavy, like the walls were holding their breath watching me. It started with small things. I'd be sorting boxes, and I'd swear I heard a sigh soft, like someone exhaling right behind me. I'd whip around, heart skipping, but the room would be empty. I chalked it up to grief. Aunt Clara had been like a second mom, and losing her hit hard. Maybe I was projecting, hearing things in the quiet. But it kept happening, faint sighs, sometimes a creak that didn't match the floorboards. I'd check the windows, the radiators, anything to explain it. Nothing fit. I decided to rearrange the place, shake off the gloom. One afternoon, I pushed the big oak bookshelf in the living room to let in more light from the bay window. It was heavier than I expected, but as I shoved, it moved oddly, like it was caught on something. I noticed the wallpaper behind it was peeling, revealing a seam in the plaster, a door outline painted over with a small knob buried under layers of paint. My pulse quickened. Why would anyone hide a door? Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a kitchen knife, scored the paint, and pried it open. Dust billowed out, making me cough. Beyond was a small room, maybe 8 by 10 feet, windowless with bare plaster walls. In the center sat a single wooden chair facing a blank wall. The floor had scratches, deep gouges like something heavy had been dragged. The air was cold, stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. I stepped inside, my shoes scuffing the dusty floor, and shivered. Why would Aunt Clara seal this off? She wasn't the type for secrets, at least I didn't think so. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate pacing, coming from that room. I froze, straining to listen. The sound was muffled but unmistakable, like someone walking in circles. I grabbed my phone, crept to the living room, and stood outside the door, which I'd left cracked open. Silence. I pushed it wider, shone the light inside. Empty, just the chair staring at the wall. I laughed nervously, feeling stupid, but my hands were shaking as I closed the door. The pacing became a nightly ritual. Always around the same time, always stopping when I got close. I started locking the door. I'd installed a cheap latch from the hardware store, but I'd find it ajar in the morning. The chair inside slightly moved, angled toward a different wall. My stomach churned every time. I stopped telling friends about the place. They'd think I was losing it. Instead, I dug into the building's history online. It had been a sanatorium in the early 1900s for the mentally ill. They used quiet rooms to isolate patients, keep them calm or confined. The description matched that room perfectly: small, windowless, built to muffle sound. The unease grew claws. I'd avoid the living room at night, stick to the bedroom, but the sounds followed. One evening, while eating takeout on the couch, I heard humming, faint, a melody Aunt Clara used to sing when I was a kid. Something about a garden. It came from behind the door. I froze, chopsticks hovering, my heart hammering. I crept over, ear to the wood. The humming stopped, replaced by a single word, scratched out like a whisper: leave. I flung the door open, nothing. But on the wall, fresh scratches formed letters. STOUT. Panic took over. I called my cousin Mark, who'd known Aunt Clara best. He hesitated, then admitted she'd had episodes. After Uncle David died in a car accident, she'd talk to herself, spend hours alone. He said she'd sealed off parts of the apartment for peace, but he didn't know about any hidden room. His voice shook, like he was holding something back. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pacing got louder, sometimes during the day. Once, I saw a shadow under the door, feet moving, pausing, like someone was standing just inside. I barricaded it with the bookshelf, but by morning, it was shifted just enough to let the door crack open. I was barely sleeping, living on coffee and fear. Desperate, I went into the room with a hammer, looking for answers. The chair was moved again, facing me this time, like it was waiting. I tore up a floorboard, dust and splinters flying, and found something wrapped in cloth, a journal, Aunt Clara's handwriting. Her entries started normal recipes, reminders, but after Uncle David's death, they turned dark. She wrote about the visitor, a presence she felt in the apartment. She blamed herself for his accident. They'd argued that night, she'd pushed him in anger, and he'd stumbled into the street, hit by a car. The police called it an accident, but she wasn't sure. She wrote about guilt, how it followed her, how she'd sit in the quiet room to confess to the walls to him. The scratches were hers, from clawing the floor in despair. The humming was her way of coping, soothing the guilt that never left. But the last entries chilled me. He's here now, watching. He knows what I did. The pacing, she wrote, wasn't her. It was him, David, or something wearing his shape, circling the room, waiting for her to admit the truth. The final page was just one line. I can't leave. He won't let me. I burned the journal in the kitchen sink, the smoke stinging my eyes. I sealed the door with cement, hired a guy from a local hardware store to do it right. I moved out the next week, crashing with Mark until I found a new place. But the sounds followed me, not literally, but in my head. The pacing, the humming, the scratches. Was it her guilt, manifesting as a haunting? Or was it David, seeking justice? I don't know. I don't want to know. The apartment sold fast. The new owners renovated, tore out walls. They found the room, but I never asked what else. I didn't want to hear it. I live in a modern condo now, no history, no secrets. But in quiet moments, I hear pacing faint like a memory I can't shake. I avoid small rooms, locked doors. I check behind furniture, just in case. Aunt Clara's death was ruled natural heart failure, but I wonder if it was fear or guilt that stopped her heart. She lived with that room for years, knowing what it held. I only lasted a month. The forgotten room doesn't forget. It remembers everything, and it waits. Sometimes I dream of the chair, facing me empty but not. I wake up sweating, checking the corners of my room. I tell myself it's over, but is it? Old houses like that have long memories, and they don't let go. If you find a sealed door in your place, leave it alone. Some rooms are meant to stay forgotten. When I moved into my new apartment, the antique mirrors in every room caught my eye, full length, ornate, with heavy brass frames. They made the small space feel bigger, almost elegant. But then I started noticing things in the reflections that weren't there, tiny discrepancies that grew into something I can't explain or forget. I'd taken the place sight unseen after a job transfer forced me to relocate fast. It was on the second floor of a modern building, clean and quiet, perfect for a fresh start. I was 32, starting a new role in marketing, and the apartment was a blank slate, except for those mirrors. The landlord, a brisk woman named Miss Carter, said they'd belonged to the previous tenant and were too heavy to remove, considered fixtures. I didn't mind. They were beautiful, their glass slightly cloudy with age, adding character to the sterile white walls. I unpacked quickly, hung my clothes, set up my desk, and thought I'd lucked out. The first oddity came a few days in. In the bedroom mirror, I'd catch a glimpse of my bed looking unmade, sheets tangled, pillows askew, when I knew I'd made it that morning. I'd blink, and the reflection would snap back to normal, crisp and tidy. I laughed it off as tired eyes. The new job was intense, long hours, but it kept happening, little mismatches. In the living room mirror, I'd see a coffee mug on the table that wasn't there in reality. I'd check, no mug. Hours later, I'd find one in the sink, used, like the mirror had shown me a glimpse of the future or a moment I'd missed. At night, it got worse. Brushing my teeth in the bathroom, I'd notice my reflection lagging, just a fraction of a second behind, like a bad video call. I'd wave my hand, it'd follow, but late. I told myself it was the lighting, the mirror's age distorting things. But the unease settled in, a cold weight in my chest. I started avoiding the mirrors at night, brushing my teeth with the light off or eyes down. Still, I'd catch myself glancing up, drawn to them, and every time something felt off, my expression too sad, too tired, not quite mine. A week in, I started covering the mirrors with spare sheets. It helped for a day or two, but curiosity pulled me back. One sleepless night, I stood in front of the hallway mirror, lit only by the streetlight filtering through the blinds. My reflection looked wrong, eyes red, like I'd been crying, though my face was dry. Then it moved. I stood still frozen, but my reflection turned its head, looking away toward the bedroom. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. When I looked again, it was just me staring back, wide-eyed. Terror took root. The next day, I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and smashed the hallway mirror, glass shattering across the floor. My hand bled from a stray shard, but in the broken pieces, I saw something worse, tiny reflections not just of me, but of moments. Me arguing with someone, a shadowy figure in the background. Me alone, head in my hands. Scenes that felt familiar but wrong, like memories I didn't want to claim. I bandaged my hand, my mind racing. I called Miss Carter, asked about the previous tenant. She was cagey, said it was a woman who'd lived there alone, passed away unexpectedly. Didn't elaborate. I dug online, searching the building's address, the tenant's name from a lease notice I found in a drawer, Ellen Marsh. An obituary popped up, 34, suicide, found in front of the bedroom mirror, rope around her neck. My stomach twisted. Her family mentioned she'd been troubled, seeing things in the mirrors, writing about regrets that haunted her. I found her journal in a box under the sink, overlooked when I moved in. Pages of neat handwriting described the mirrors, how they showed her mistakes, fights with her sister, a betrayal she regretted, moments she couldn't undo. She'd inherited the mirrors from her grandmother, who'd warned they held memories. Ellen thought they were cursed, or maybe her mind was breaking. The last entry read, "They won't stop showing me. I can't look away anymore." The mirrors were hers, and now mine. I saw my own regrets next. In the kitchen mirror, a scene played out, me shoving my brother during an argument years ago, a stupid fight that ended with him falling, breaking his spine. He's been in a wheelchair since, and I've carried the guilt like a stone in my gut. I'd buried it, moved on, but the mirror dragged it up, vivid accusing. My reflection stared back, eyes hollow, mouthing words I couldn't hear. It escalated. The bedroom mirror showed me losing my job, my boss's face disappointed. The living room mirror showed me alone, old, surrounded by empty bottles. My fears, my shame, played out like movies I couldn't pause. I'd scream at them, pound the glass, but they kept going, silent and relentless. My reflection started acting on its own, walking away, sitting down, while I stood frozen. Once, in the bathroom, it smiled while I cried. I couldn't take it. I tore down every mirror, bloodied my hands, dragging them to the curb. The landlord was furious, threatened to charge me, but I didn't care. I moved out a week later, crashing with a coworker until I found a new place. But the damage was done. In any reflective surface now, windows, a glass of water, I catch glimpses. Not always clear, but there my brother's face, hurt, my future, bleak. I don't know if it's the mirror's curse or my own mind, cracked open by what I saw. I live minimally now, no mirrors, no glass frames. I keep curtains drawn, avoid anything that reflects. But regret doesn't need a mirror to find you. It's in every quiet moment, every glance at my phone's black screen. Was it supernatural? Or just my guilt, amplified by those old mirrors? I'll never know. Ellen's journal said she saw her sister's face, the one she'd fought with, in every reflection before she ended it. I wonder if she found peace. I haven't. My new place is small, bare. I check surfaces obsessively, cover them at night. Friends say I seem jumpy, distant. I don't tell them why. How do you explain that you're afraid of your own reflection? That it might show you something you can't unsee? I called my brother last week, apologized again for that day. He forgave me years ago, but the mirror doesn't care. It shows what I feel, not what's true. The building's new tenant reached out online, asked if I knew why the mirrors were gone. I didn't reply. Let them figure it out. Or better, let them stay ignorant. Some truths are better left in the dark, unreflected.